Hello, welcome to the Wellness Universe Wellnesspalooza 2025 event. The Wellness Universe believes happy, healthy, healed humans lead to peace globally. And we provide this event to help you live your best life experience. My name is Dr. Pamela J. Pine, and I am an international health development and communication professional with a specialty in childhood trauma. I've been a member of the Wellness Universe for a bit short of a year. During our session of workplace transformation through trauma awareness, my hope for you is to learn something about the importance of recognizing the role of trauma in our lives and addressing it in the workplace for a healthier and more productive work environment. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you share this event with a friend and be sure to leave a rating and review upon completion when prompted. Everyone who has joined me today will be receiving my free gift of sections of my book, Stop the Silence, Thriving After Child Sexual Abuse. My buddy, Leah Skurdell, welcome Leah, will put in the chat how you can get this free gift and how you can contact me. Please use the chat to engage. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat along the way, and I'll be happy to get to them as well. So, without further ado, welcome again to Workplace Transformation through Trauma Awareness. I love this slide. I just love this slide. I love these kids. These are Samoan kids. Happy children make happy adults. Who is this session for? This is an important question. This session is ideal for leaders, company leaders, association executives, HR professionals, managers, workers, and related others who aim to create healthier and more productive workplaces. Any kind of workplace is the kind of workplace that we're trying to reach. It's perfect for those people who are seeking actionable solutions to boost team resilience, improve workplace dynamics, and align with organizational goals for excellence and community impact. I'm just going to quickly go over what the purpose of this session is and the learning objectives. The purpose is to better understand and apply how addressing adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs, in the workplace can improve employee well-being, boost productivity, and enhance organizational success. We want to learn how ACEs influence adult behavior, which they do in a fundamental way, and affect their health and workplace dynamics. The amount of impact on the workplace as a result of trauma is beyond most people's recognition, and it's important to recognize. Learn practical strategies for recognizing and mitigating trauma-related stress. Learn techniques for integrating trauma-informed practices into organizational management, and identify types of policy developments that support employee resilience and well-being. Takeaways: productivity gains, addressing ACEs leads to improved job satisfaction and employee retention, enhance collaboration, learn methods to foster stronger team communication and inclusivity, actionable strategies, gaining tools to create a supportive, empathic workplace culture. And I'm sure we all have our horror stories about those workplaces that weren't particularly empathic and that created additional trauma and stress, and it wasn't particularly good for our productivity. And the bottom line benefits: understanding how focusing on employee well-being increases organizational success, and it's important to point out the bottom line as well. First, I want to really underline that this is tough stuff. Talking about childhood trauma, childhood abuse, childhood issues can be triggering for some people. We're going to spend some time talking about those things, so that if you need to take some time for yourself, get a glass of water, walk out of the room, take some deep breaths, do whatever you need to do to stay comfortable, grounded, and healthy, that's what you need to do for yourself. We will certainly understand. We're going to be talking then about the strategies for recognizing and mitigating trauma-related stress, techniques for integrating trauma-informed practices into organizational management, and focus some on the policy development to support employee resilience and well-being. So do take very, very good care of yourself. Do what you need to do for you. What are ACEs? Some people at this point have heard about ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, but not everyone, and few people realize the enormity of it and the impact of them. They are stressful experiences that occur during childhood that directly impact on a child or affect the family environment in which they live. There's all kinds of ACEs: physical, sexual, emotional abuse, neglect, household adversity resulting from domestic violence, imprisonment, substance, including alcohol abuse, parental mental health problems, or family breakdowns. So they're all different. There are 10 typically recognized ACEs, and we'll talk a little bit about them. More recent work has extended the definition to include child neglect, parental bereavement, and children living in care. The foster system, you may or may not know a lot about the foster system. It has huge problems. The potential impacts of ACEs are physiological and behavioral, as well as psychological, and transfer into poor outcomes across a wide range of health domains, and we'll talk a little bit about this as well. What is the ACE study? Very, very, very quickly. The ACE study was started about 25, maybe even 30 years ago, originated by two MDs, Dr. Vincent Felitti and Dr. Robert Anda. It involved 17,337 middle-class adults, so not a small data set. Robust information came out of it. And the very existence of these experiences were found to be quite common, though unrecognized, because they're lost in time and further protected by shame, secrecy, and social taboos against routinely exploring certain areas of human experience. Our typical medical history, which needs to change, avoids them, does not deal with them, does not ask. Think of when you've been to a doctor's office. Did anybody ask you whether you had sexual or physical or emotional trauma in your background? I'm betting not. These effects, their effects, the ACEs effects, a half century later in adult life, are so powerfully and proportionally related to adult well-being, health risks, mental illness, job performance, social malfunction, suicide, and a range of biomedical diseases, including cancer and even premature death. If you're unfamiliar with ACEs, or what they are or what they do, you can look up some information on the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention website and other places as well. All you have to do is Google ACEs and a million things will come up. The correlation of childhood outcomes and a childhood trauma and adult outcomes is profound. We mentioned some of these. These are the 10 ACEs that are typically listed: physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, etc. And they are often fundamentally damaging to children, the adolescents they become, and ultimately the adults they become. It affects our central nervous systems, and I'll show you a slide about that, a couple of slides actually, to give you a better idea of what this actually does. It's not only, I put that in quotations mark, it's not only an issue of having experienced a traumatic event, but it has biological and neurological impact on our bodies. So this is the effect on brain development. And as you can see, I hope it's big enough, at the bottom, we have these adverse childhood experiences. And that affects, on the next level, a disrupted neurological development. So the brain, as well as other aspects of our neurology. That affects the social, emotional, and cognitive impairment. That affects the adoption of health risk behaviors. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Why do people drink? Why do people smoke? Why do people use illicit drugs? And then we have the effect on disease, disability, and social problems. And at the top, if you can see, but I'm telling you anyway, there's an effect on actual early death. And this has been documented. This is not guesswork. This is not assumption. This has been shown. ACEs have severe psychological and physical outcomes, and they strongly affect social activities and the likelihood of the 10 most common causes of death in the United States. This is important stuff. As you can well imagine, it not only affects us individually, but it affects everybody around us. And we all know someone. We all know someone, whether you know it or not, we all know someone who has been affected. The issues of health and well-being and early death, smoking, severe obesity, physical inactivity, depression, suicide attempts, alcoholism, illicit drug use, injected drug use, 50 plus partners, sexually transmitted infections, all of this is affected by early traumatic experiences, and they contribute to an enormous societal and monetary burden on everyone, including our families, our communities, our societies, our companies, our organizations, and our actual national and international economies. So if you're thinking of ways to make a difference in our individual as well as every other aspect of our well-being, this is it. 1 out of 4 girls and approximately 1 out of 6 boys, and that might even be an underestimation, is, for example, sexually abused by the time they're 18 years old in the United States alone. Those numbers, those stats are very similar across many countries. In Europe, Europe as a whole, it's 1 out of 5 kids. We're talking about a lot of people. We're talking about more than 55 million adult survivors of child sexual abuse in the United States. That's a lot of people, gang. And we have to do something to change those numbers because it's affecting everyone, from the person all the way down the line, as I noted before. So the ACE scores, the prevalence, 33% of our population, these are US statistics, have no ACE score. 25% have 1, 15% have 2, and these are the ACEs that I spoke to you about, the sexual abuse, emotional abuse, et cetera, 10% have 3, 6% have 4. 11% of our population have 5 or more different ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, in their backgrounds. This is a lot of trauma and a lot of devastation that we're talking about. What I often say is that if you have 5 or more ACEs and you're still walking around, you're one of the lucky ones, because the impact can be so devastating that early death or suicide or smoking, severe smoking or alcoholism is not unusual. They are self-medicating. They are numbing themselves. So just an example of abuse, psychological by their parents is 11% in again, US statistics. 28% were physically abused, and 22%. So almost a fourth of our population was sexually abused as children. Now, this is both really important information and fascinating. Addiction is due This is the traditional concept. I'm going on to the more reasonable concept in a second. But addiction is due to the characteristics intrinsic in the molecular structure of some substance. That's what we tend to think of as addiction. However, what we've learned from the ACE study is that addiction and other outcomes highly correlate with characteristics intrinsic to that of the individual childhood experience. That's important information. What we know is that, as I just said a moment ago, that we are or they, or we collectively are self-medicating with drugs and alcohol and cigarettes and whatnot in order to cope with our backgrounds. But this is a fascinating concept, and what I want to say is many of our most common and intractable public health problems are unconsciously attempted solutions. They are normal reactions to abnormal circumstances. We drink because of our problems. We use drugs because of our problems. We smoke to calm ourselves down. They're personal problems, and they date back to childhood and buried in time and concealed by time, by shame and social taboo. And what I was saying was that I've been doing this for 25 years now. And when I first started, literally people could not get the phrase child sexual abuse out of their mouths. And I purposely named my organization Stop the Silence, Stop Child Sexual Abuse, because when I was on TV or I was on the radio or they wrote about us in magazines, they had to say our full name: Stop the Silence, Stop Child Sexual Abuse. And it got into the airwaves quite a bit, to granted a lot of people's discomfort, but it changed the circumstances. And I was very happy actually about that. I'm just going to go through these a little bit just to really, really hammer it in. These are ACEs versus smoking as an adult. So you can see here that people with 0 ACEs have a relatively low smoking rate. These are percentages of people who smoke, and people who have 6 or more ACEs are coming in at about 16%. So 4 times the rate of smoking than other individuals. Similarly with alcoholism. Here, 0 ACE score, slightly over 2, not even 3% are alcoholics. And here you have about 16% of people who have an ACE score of 4 or more. Same thing with injection drug use. I mean, look at that. Look at that increase. 0 ACE score and 4 or more. This is the percentage of having injected drugs. So it's many times more than people who don't have an ACE score. Chronic depression. I mean, we've all been depressed, but chronic depression often comes from a background of abuse. Suicide attempts. Look at this. The percentage, this is a percentage attempting suicide with 4 or more ACEs is practically 20 times more than those people who have no ACEs in their backgrounds. Same thing with being raped. There's a whole social understanding and explanation around this that I don't really have time to go into, but there are emotional cues basically that people are responding to with regard to their reactions and situations, what they do, and the positions that they put themselves in and find themselves in. It's a lot of information, but you can study that and look at that up a little bit more. So the ACE summary of findings: common and largely unrecognized. The level of shame and fear And embarrassment is through the roof in this stuff. People don't want to talk. They're afraid they're afraid what people will say. They're afraid what their families will say. I know a bunch of people who have literally lost their families having reported their own child abuse when they were children. Their families just literally disowned them. It's the basis of much adult medication and public health problems. They are strong predictors of later social functioning. They're interrelated and not solitary. If you have one ACE, two ACEs will build on the one, three ACEs will build on that, and it will become worse, not independently one step up, but collectively. And it's the leading determinant of health, social, and professional well-being. Ask your doctors to start asking people. Everybody should be asked about their trauma history. Now, let's turn to trauma and the workplace. Traumatic stress can lead to an overproduction of stress hormones like cortisol. That's the thing that affects your heart and its functioning, which can in turn cause inflammation, weaken your immune system, and increase your risk for physical illness. Trauma can really take a physical, mental, and emotional toll on the daily lives of people, and they don't necessarily get to just leave those feelings at the door on their way to work every day. Well, that just makes sense, right? You're not going to, okay, I'm at work, people, it's hard for people to compartmentalize, there we go, easily in that way. 4 times more of unplanned absences are taken by workers who rate their mental health as fair to poor, and that is affected by childhood trauma. The link between trauma, well-being, and performance. Very uncomfortable emotions. The feelings most likely show include anger, fear, sadness, and shame, and we've all seen that in the workplace. I know we have. Emotional dysregulation. This can create a sense of being caught between feeling too much overwhelmed or too little. We numb ourselves down, and perhaps you have experienced all those emotions as well. And that can lead to self-medication such as substance abuse. Perceived personal vulnerability. Traumatic events can challenge a person's belief that they're safe, which can result in excessive worry, intrusive thoughts, and trauma-induced hallucinations or delusions. And again, there's all kinds of childhood trauma, and maybe you have some, or maybe you have one. Maybe if you're really, really lucky, actually, you have none. But a lot of people have a fair amount of trauma in the background. The physical symptoms include ailments such as sleep disturbances, gastrointestinal distress, and respiratory issues, and they can manifest from traumatic experiences. Individuals may be unaware of the connection between their emotions and these physical symptoms. Really important in order to alleviate the problems, to address them. But wouldn't it be even better if we prevented them and didn't have to address them? So there's a whole field of study around prevention. That's not what we're here to talk about today, but there's a whole field of how do you prevent adverse childhood experiences? How do you prevent it with your own children? What do you look for? What are the signs and symptoms? How are you going to address it in your family? How do you talk to your children? What do you do if you think something is off? All of these issues are important things to learn about how to prevent rather than treat, but then, of course, address once we are adolescents or adults. So let's take a look at this, yeah? ACEs and indicators of impaired worker performance. The increased stress, cortisol, all this comes into play. And with absenteeism, you can see this is the percentage of impaired performance. 5% of people with 0 have some impaired performance. But when we come to the purple, this is 4 or more ACEs. Look how that jumps. Impaired performance is highly impacted by what happens to you as a kid. Same thing here, serious financial problems. And I know I've spoken to thousands of survivors of various types of abuse at this point. And I know that economics is an issue, and it has to do with dysregulation. It has to do with not being able to hold a job well. It has to do with not being able to perform your job well if you're going to your job and still experiencing and feeling and manifesting the trauma that you had as a kid. Same thing with serious job problems. Trauma and the common workplace response. Leaders and others often do shy away from the topic, even though every organization feels the effect of trauma in the workplace. I can say that unequivocally. I know that. That is not a guess. That is not a hunch. That is not maybe it's this way. It is this way. People don't want to talk about this, and I used to joke that I could clear a cocktail party in 5 minutes. Ask me what I do for a living. People would walk away from me. People would tell me to be quiet in trains where I wasn't sitting in the quiet car if I was speaking on the phone while I was developing an event and calling up and talking about child sexual abuse. I literally got told to be quiet. And I thought actually 2 men were going to get into a fight over this because the person across the aisle from me told the person who was right in front of me to leave me alone, that I had every right to do what I was doing. Here's my bet. My bet that the guy across from the aisle from me was either a survivor of some kind of abuse or has it in his family. But we need to talk about this stuff. Allowing suppressed trauma can have catastrophic effects for the individual and the organizations. It often feels like efficiency is prioritized over vulnerability and productivity over self-care. Now, I'm not saying that people who have a company, who have an organization, can say, oh, you're not performing. I really feel bad for you. There must be trauma in the background. Don't worry about it. Go home, get some rest. We're not talking about completely dismissing what's going on. What we're saying is if we address it and recognize it, there are things that companies, corporations, other types of workplaces can put into place that will enhance the workplace and their bottom line. And if managers and owners understood that it was going to affect their bottom line, which it does, they might be more amenable to actually doing something about it. We have the power to make workplaces engines for mental health and well-being. Doing so will require organizations to rethink how they protect workers from harm, foster a sense of connection among workers. And in these United States, may I pause and say, connectivity between people in general is a problem. The mental health crisis in this country at this point is at a critical point, a critical mass. We are disconnected from each other, and the workplace can help us make those ties, reform those ties, make the connections between people that people then can carry into their own other parts of their lives. We need to show them that they matter, make space for their lives outside work, and support their long-term professional growth. This may not be easy, and I recognize that, but it will be worth it because the benefit will accrue to both workers and organizations and their families, their communities, their societies, and our nations that is a plural. We need to be proactive in addressing trauma in the workplace. A proactive response can immediately create a safe space Recognizing a difficult time for a worker before they ask for time off can go far to demonstrate that a manager's compassion and understanding and address employee loyalty and commitment and have a ripple effect. I don't know about you, but I'm in the public health communication realm, and I have worked, I will leave them unnamed, for some agencies that are public health and otherwise health oriented who have tortured, I don't know how else to put it, their employees. They overwork them. They are unempathetic to situations, grave situations going on in their lives. And the employees are coming to work stressed and burdened and bringing in their other past trauma and building on that. This is good for absolutely no one, not the employers, not the employees, not the outcomes, not the bottom line. While managers may not have seen this type of response as their role, a change of this kind in managers' roles will go far to enhance the working environment and increase productivity. I can give you literally right now, I'm working on getting an educational program online, and I'm working with somebody who's made some mistakes. Her end of this is putting all the electronics in place online. So because it's an online program and an online course, but she wasn't feeling well. There's work that needs to be done. And I looked at her, we were on Zoom, and I said, "You're not looking well. Are you okay?" And she said, "I'm really not feeling well. I have a massive headache." And I said, "Stop, just stop. We'll get it done. We'll get it done within a good time frame." And I texted her this morning and said, "How are you doing?" She said, "Now I have fever." I said, "Don't work today." She was going to do some work today. And I said, "Let's pick this up again on Monday." She was enormously thankful, but frankly, that's what she should expect. That's what she should expect, some empathy and compassion. If I've got fever and a headache, I don't want to be working, and I want a manager to understand that. Creating a trauma-informed workplace is critical. In trauma-informed workplaces, all people, both leaders and employees, seek to continuously understand the impact of trauma on mind and body, and we went through a little of that. The psychology, for example, psychologically, we're talking about a relationship between depression we heard about, but bipolar disorder, psychosis, anxiety disorder, various types of personality disorders. It is hugely disruptive to the brain, the whole neurology, and therefore the behaviors that come out of the disruptive functioning. So we need to understand that. Just generally speaking, I'm not telling everybody to be a scientist. I'm not telling everybody to read all the articles, reviewed articles on this subject, to have some understanding, just like we did with HIV/AIDS and breast cancer, which 50 years ago, we didn't say the word out loud. We didn't say breast out loud. Certainly didn't say it amongst mixed company, but we also didn't say it to each other, women to each other. That's changed substantially. A bunch of women got together and put their foot down and said, this cannot be anymore. We want the US government to start funding these programs. This is critical to our health and our well-being and our families. And that's what happened. Now, breast and cancer, there was the C word. You remember that? It was the C word. People couldn't say cancer. That has changed. And we are the people to change those kinds of scenarios. Same thing happened with HIV/AIDS. It was the gay plague, right? And at this point, well, Elizabeth Taylor and others stepped in and made a profound difference. And now billions and billions and billions have been spent both on breast cancer prevention and treatment, and the same with HIV/AIDS. So we need to understand the impact. We need to cultivate an environment of safety, agency, and respect for team members. We need to incorporate knowledge about trauma into the workplace policies, procedures, and standards. We need to prevent unnecessary trauma triggers that can result in bringing a memory of a traumatic experience to mind. Now, you don't know always if you're going to do that, but if we are a little bit more cognizant and sensitive to the fact that this is so pervasive in our societies, we can be a little bit more thoughtful that if we're about to say something that brings these kinds of subjects up, then we can say, just like I did in the beginning, some of this stuff may be hard to hear. NPR does that all the time. This next story may be difficult for some people to hear, may be inappropriate for small children. Whatever it is, we can address it in whatever small, medium, or large way that we can. So, empowerment. We're talking about worker empowerment. Trauma-informed systems we need to develop. A trauma-informed system acknowledges the widespread impact of trauma and integrates knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices. A trauma-informed system is built upon SAMHSA's 4 R's: realization of trauma prevalence, recognition of its signs and symptoms, response by providing trauma-sensitive care, and resisting re-traumatization. As obviously you know, I work with a lot of survivors and have for a long time. And we're careful. We're not perfect. We've made our mistakes. We've said or done things that have been difficult for people to deal with. I try to backtrack and say, I'm very, very sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you if I did. But these are things that we can, incorporate into our heart, our mind, our soul. When employees feel safe and not ridiculed, judged, or embarrassed, they're more likely to experiment, share ideas, and be creative and innovative. Not only are they more likely, they are more willing to take the risk because nobody's going to berate them, embarrass them, call them down, tell them they're worthless, etc. But nearly half of employees still feel uncomfortable in their work environment. That's quite a number. Half feel uncomfortable. We need to change the environment. Here are some strategies to do that. Acknowledge the traumatic events and their impact and educate not only yourself, but your workforce, or if you're a worker, bring it up to management. Hey, I'd like to give a presentation about this, or I'd like to distribute this information, or I'd like to work with you on creating a safer and more secure and more understanding workplace so that we are more comfortable and productive. We need to grant flexibility in work arrangements and deadlines when people ask, when possible. Ask for input and revise, develop, and communicate policies. That's not rocket science. It's just not, and we can do that. We need to model self-care. If we're not feeling well as managers, we can say, I'm really, really not feeling well. I was just online literally 2 days ago, and somebody said, I'm so sorry, I couldn't be on the call the other day. I've just been so sick. Well, that gives me, that gives me allowance to next time I'm really not feeling well, say, I'm not going to talk a lot right now. I'm not feeling so great. And to really prioritize our own health. We need to have a response strategy and resources in place. Work with HR to do that. Seek input from affected individuals on their support needs, and have a response strategy and resource in place. What do we do in the case of A, B, C, X, Y, and Z? How to respond? What is the workplace response to these actions, activities, workplace responses? This is not easy stuff, to use the vernacular. We need to be thoughtful. We need to take our time, not only your time, our time to learn and develop policies and programs that work for our workplaces. We need to recognize that adjustments can and will have to be made as we move forward. We need to recognize that our workforces and our productivity and you will be better off for your willingness to address this critical area. I love this slide too, and I end with it a lot, and then I'm going to open for questions in case that there are any. This was from this picture was from a training that I did with funds from a major foundation in New Zealand. And what we did there, we did 4 actually trainings and brought in all different types of people from various work environments, from education, from the police, from social services, psychologists, medical institutions, et cetera, et cetera. We brought them all in during the various trainings so that they could interact each other and hear some of it. Was a lot more. It was a 3-day training, so it was very robust. It was very detailed. Well, we brought all these people in, and by the end of the training, not only were we all more knowledgeable and understanding about what needed to happen for ourselves, for our children, for our families, but for our workplaces. And as you may be able to see, these are not false smiles. We were solid. By the end, 3 days, we were solid. We were accepting of each other. We were really appreciative of what people had been willing to share. And all of these different people decided that they were going to share their workplace information so that they could start interacting in an appropriate way to help their overall community, including obviously their workers. So that's all I got right now. I mean, I could probably talk for another 3 hours, but I don't think I'm supposed to do that. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. I can see Karen K. I can see the text here. Let me see if there's anything above Karen. Nope. Okay, so Karen says, as a white woman in public health, how are you dismantling your own racism when you work with Black and brown people? Great question. How do the predominantly white women in this group unlearn the layers of geographic and personhood trauma so we do not harm or double down on harm? I'll tell you, Karen, that really hit me. It's such an important and such an appropriate question. Part of that, Karen, and please pipe in, in the chat, Karen, or anybody else, part of that is working really on ourselves and putting ourselves out into environments as we can to feel comfortable. I mean, I grew up in all white America, white middle class America. That's how I grew up. And I took myself out. I've literally worked throughout the world. I've worked on every continent except the polar caps. And I've worked with all kinds of populations, and I became me with them. I stopped seeing, not that there aren't differences in culture, that's not what I'm saying, but I stopped feeling the differences between us in terms of humanity. So that's one thing that we can do individually, purposefully put ourselves in places that allow us to share with people who are not like us. I'm going to read this again, though. Work with Black and brown people. So what has happened also as well, Karen, as a result of that, and putting myself in places and with working with people who are from different cultures and countries, and and different racial backgrounds, is that I just became comfortable. I really, really just became comfortable, and I think people pick up on that. So I think you can see my mouse. This guy here, his name is Akare Maricel Thompson. I love he goes by Ray. I love Ray. Um, we make quite a team. We do a fair amount of presenting together, not so much recently, but a lot in the past. Ray is 6'6". He's about, I don't know, 270 pounds. He's huge. He's a Samoan, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, Samoan, big, big people. I'm 5'1.5". And when we started working together, and Ray knows it, he came at me a few times. There was a lot of anger. I mean, not physical. It was no physical. I'm doing this metaphorically, but there was a lot coming at me. Anytime I asked him to do something that we needed to do for the project we were working on, I got a lot of defense. Within a few years, Ray publicly was thanking me for his support and recognizing how angry he was at white people and thinking that they were ne'er-do-goods. And the relationship that Ray and I built changed us both. And I think that Karen and everybody else is part of the process. So again, I could go on and on, but recognizing, white women in work environments and cultural environments and community environments, letting it be a little bit, letting yourself be, letting yourself learn, growing into the experience, inviting other people in. Karen, I hope that does it some. Any other questions? I'm more than happy to respond to them. And in the work environment as well, Karen and other people, in the work environment as well, we could recognize that. We can recognize that there are differences. There's no shame in recognizing differences. We're different. We have different cultures. We have different backgrounds. There's no shame in that. But recognizing those differences and accepting those differences. And that can be verbalized. There's no... Laura DeFranco, wonderful publisher, writer, author. I mean, she's, amazing. She had said, she just brought this up the other day about letting things come out of your mouth. Careful a little bit, obviously. You need to be a little careful, sensitive, obviously, and recognize that what you say has manifests on people as well, but let things come out of your mouth. I don't understand this, or I don't understand this, or would you help me understand something that I've seen a little bit better? And people generally will help you do that, I think. That's my experience in any case. Anything else? Let's see. We're 5 minutes before. No, we've got about 10 minutes total time left. If there are any other questions,
Pamela? Pamela, it's Leah here. We're going to end at the bottom of the hour.
Okay.
And sorry for that tech glitch, but we're going to end at the bottom of the hour because of our schedule. Thank you so much for sharing this really hard to hear information and letting us know that when we raise awareness about our responses to childhood trauma, that we can transform our workplace cultures.
That's
and
right.
That you shared some really important strategies on how to create a trauma-informed workplace, and that is very helpful for us going forward. Thank you. So we'll let you wrap up. I know that I saw that Claudia was typing, and I don't know if Claudia has it. There she goes. Okay, you can now read Claudia's response, and then you can wrap up.
Sure. I love the Stop the Silence. It's kind of wait a minute, there's more up here. Wait a minute. Okay. It's kind of a relief as I grow up learning that I have to quiet my voice and don't stand up for myself in order to survive. Never felt safe spreading my voice. And in so many ways, this traumatized me deeply as it was better to hide than show myself. I understand. How can we overcome a trauma which we have been consistently reinforced in so many ways, especially in the workplace, as being a woman from a sexist country, listening to "you are not good enough, you're never going to achieve this because that is not your place." Yeah, well, lot of work we've got culturally and geographically and all of that. And I would say, Claudia, very, very briefly, because we are going to wrap up in just a few, but I'd be happy to, I would love to have actually that conversation with you. Leah's going to share my links actually in a second. And please feel free to write to me. But, you know, I've been in that situation and I've turned it around. You know, I didn't start being who I was recently, and have come into a lot of sexist environments. My primary initial area of work was in North Africa and the Middle East. So, you know, I've seen it and heard it, a lot of it, and this is not going to be as helpful as I'd like it to be because this is a long conversation. But Claudia, keeping doing what you're doing as well as you're doing it and showing that you are and you can and that you don't have to apologize for it. Be careful, of course. Some of the environments that I think you're talking about can be dangerous for women who step out of their place, so to speak. But it can be done, and we can change environments. But Claudia, truly, I'd be more than happy and thrilled to have this conversation because it's such an important one. When we're talking about the world, we're talking about Africa, we're talking about Asia, we're talking about Latin America. I know what you're talking about. Write to me. Let's set up a time to have a conversation about it. But thank you for the question. It's critical. Thank you. I am going to quickly read something, please. I have to do this. In addition to any questions you may have that I can answer for you here, please remember to reach out to me. There we go. I'd already said it. And connect with me on my Wellness Universe profile and leave a rating and review. We hope you have given. We hope we have given you a 5-star experience. I look forward to your feedback and connecting with you. And please use the links in the chat to get my free gift. You get a lot of my book, actually. You get Ray's story in that free gift, and you get the story that I wrote, as well as the background, introduction, etc. So thank you, Leah. Thank you, the Wellness Universe. Thank you, everybody who's on here. It's been a pleasure to talk with you, and look forward to hopefully joining you in other places in the future.